have a voice, which is so very, very important for all peoples to have a voice. Young, old, rich, poor, it doesn't matter.
It just tends to be put to one side as was many a time, and therefore it deserves more discussion and more attention.
The coverage is always just one very particular story, so I think there's so many more voices that need to be heard in this. So it's less these issues aren't being covered and more how are we covering these issues, who's getting heard.
Like from where I come from, in terms of my work, like I know that for everything that you see there's like 5 or 6 or 10 different stories or different influences about how that came about. But you know, and I wouldn't criticise any of the programmes that are on the television, like they are about, you know, real issues, but they're just looking at them maybe from one angle.
We started to realise that mainstream media didn't have a huge source for the Palestinian side of the story within Ireland. So a lot of the work we were doing was new and was being accepted because it was well verified, it was backed up, it was reliable information. However, there have been issues where we have seen very obvious media bias, and it's not down to a lack of information to begin with.
Abuse is alive and well, and very little been done about it. And it's never more alive than since the recession, because money is scarce. Children are abused. The awful abuse we had learned about with children, with the clergy abusing children. It was hidden. And unfortunately, children are abusing their parents.
If you take legislation on housing or who has access to housing at the moment, the issues discussed around that tend to be still had within the same circles, and the people that are really affected are not being included in that discussion, I would think.
I mean, if you're talking about LGBT issues, for example, the big issue there is marriage equality, and that is really, really, really important, and of course we should be talking about marriage equality. But are we talking about marriage equality to the exclusion of talking about kids being bullied, of, you know, harassment, things like that? It's like there's almost this one story that gets heard, and that's really important to hear those stories. But I think one of the great things are things like different forms of media, new media, social media. What they can do is you can have different conversations, you can have all different kinds of conversations, which is a thing you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, which is awesome.
We want people to know what it is we do so that they can come and get assistance with their problems or their issues. We're not about, you know, promoting ourselves on a, you know, on a national level and, you know, wanting credit for what it is we do, but it is important that people understand what we do and give some value to that, because I suppose, you know, with any social project, you know, you're going to be evaluated in terms of whether you're funded further, you know, on the basis of what you do. And obviously we're a very local project, we're based in Ballymun, so, you know, you have a lot of people who, not that they don't care about what happens in Ballymun, but it's not of, you know, particular individual local interest to them. So it's important that they understand, I suppose, what it is we do and how we do it.
You're dealing with an Israeli embassy here that are very well funded and put quite a lot of money and effort into media. And on the flip side of that, then you have individual volunteer activists trying to get, you know, to keep up with that, to get a fair and unbiased sort of reporting out there. So I think the mainstream media probably need to be very aware of that and to not just give equal representation to both sides, but to actually ground their reporting in international law and human rights, because that is the crux of this conflict. It's not a land war, it's not a religious war. It has to be grounded in very, very sound footing, and international law and human rights are universal. So that's a very good start point.
Harness the powers of, let's say, the likes of Twitter or Facebook to get the issues out there and have them debated, and also how to get the powers that be to use social media to engage with people to discuss the issues that are involved in social justice.
And we've got to face it dead on. And I have great admiration for the social workers who have to deal in that field, because the government does not come online with them. Society is afraid to face it. And of course, they shouldn't be afraid to face it, because if you don't face it, you won't change it. And I'm a great believer in standing up there and saying, yes, this is the way it is, and this is what has happened to me, and I want everybody to know about it, and I want something done about it.
For a lot of people, like myself included, I would have been really intimidated talking to like big names or what have you until I started on Twitter, and I think that leveling effect is really great. I think that's something that like mainstream media can learn from new media.
Well, first of all, we get at the government. this is what we do. We get at the government, we say, what are you doing about this? You know about it.
Not just bringing in voices when it's convenient, but actually having a conversation as opposed to a monologue is the biggest thing that it can do for us.
I suppose in taking the broader picture, I suppose, of media in Ireland around the conflict, I think social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc. are very, very useful. In the most recent bombardment of Gaza in November 2012, there was a huge use of social media, particularly Twitter, with the likes of Harry Fear and people like that reporting from Gaza. However, when dealing with mainstream media, and as the public relations officer at the time, this wasn't enough. You need verifiable facts, you need to be 100% reliable, and you need to be dealing with partners on the ground in Gaza or whatever war situation you're talking about. Always going with what's reliable, what can be backed up, and grounding yourself in universal principles of international law and human rights.
I know, yeah, you're right, I have a voice.